A few weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, on November 26th, Donald Trump had signed an executive order deemed Lady Justice regarding missing and murdered Indigenous women. What we're going to do is we're going to watch about a 5 minute video, and we're going to come back and I'm going to talk about it.
Okay, thank you very much. It is my honor to sign an executive order. We're going to be doing it right now to address a tragedy facing Native American communities, the crisis of missing and murdered American Indians and Alaska Natives, in particular women and children. It's a tremendous problem. It's been going on for a long time, many, many decades, beyond that. And we're going to address it and address it very strongly. We're grateful to be joined by Attorney General William Barr, Secretary David Bernhardt, other members of my administration, and several terrific Native American leaders. These are great leaders. These statistics are sobering and heartbreaking. Recently, more than 5,000 Native American women and girls were reported missing in a single year. While the majority return home or are found, too many are still missing and their whereabouts are unknown. And they usually don't find them. One study showed that Native American women in certain tribal communities are 10 times more likely to be murdered than the average American. The victims and their families deserve action, and this should have happened many years ago. With my order today, we're launching Operation Lady Justice, an interagency task force led by Attorney General Barr and Secretary Bernhardt to develop an aggressive government-wide strategy to end this terrible situation. The Department of Justice will also be issuing grants to improve safety in Native American communities. We will leverage every resource we have to bring safety to our tribal communities, and we will not waver in this mission. We're taking this very seriously. This has never been done before, and I've seen it just by reading and watching the news. It's a very serious problem. It's a horrible problem. This is only the latest action my administration has taken to support American Indians and Alaska Natives. I signed legislation restoring benefits that were unfairly taken away from Alaska Natives serving in Vietnam. In March, I launched an initiative to improve the health and safety of children in the care of Indian Health Service. And in September, we hosted the first ever National Tribal Broadband Summit. And earlier this month, the White House hosted the first ever Native American Veterans Conference. Some of the folks in the room were there. With Operation Lady Justice, we will bring new hope to Native American communities across the nation. We will deliver justice for the victims, closure for the families, and safety to those in harm's way. And on behalf of every missing or murdered Native American woman and child, I am going to sign this order, and it will be a great honor to be signing this order. And thank you all for being here. Thank you very much. So that's something that should have been done a long time ago, decades ago, frankly. So we have with us some of the great leaders. Melanie Benjamin, Chief Executive of the Mille Lacs Band. We have Myron, and would you like to say something? Come here a minute, Melanie. Say a few words, please.
Buju Anina Nishnabi Mino Gijigad Nungum, Melanie Benjamin Indigo. And it is my honor, my privilege to be here today with the signing, because we cannot have this happening anymore. It's a historical day to know that our missing and murdered women have a place and a remembrance, and that we care about them and their families. So, Mr. President, Chimigwech, thank you very much.
Thank you, Melanie. That's
really
very
appreciate
nice.
that.
Thank you very much, Melanie. I appreciate that. We have Myron Lizer, Vice President of the Navajo Nation, and Dottie Lizer and Haley Lizer. Myron, maybe say a few words, if you would.
Yes, sir.
Please.
I'm honored, President. Thank you for having us and this historic executive order. The Navajo Nation thanks you, and much more First Nations thanks you. As the host people of the land, we feel that our prayers are being answered, and First Nations prayers are powerful. So thank you, Mr. President. We look forward to seeing some improvement in the Indian country.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Myra. We have a man whose name I want to use. I maybe have to change my name because I love this name. Alvin A.J. Not Afraid, Chairman of the Crow Nation. I love this name.
Thank you,
Where are
President.
you? Come here. Say a few words.
Yes, sir. First of all, President, we are honored that you recognize the Native Nations as well as the Crow Nation. We've been proponents of the Trump administration and all the endeavors.
Okay.
And understanding that I personally am affected by the missing and murdered Indigenous women events that are circulating. So knowing that you support in the realm of this executive order, the Crow tribe is honored. Thank you, Mr.
Well,
President.
thank you for coming. I appreciate it very much. Is that true? You're not afraid? Are you not afraid of anything?
Yes, sir. I also have a gift
I wanna
of
know.
our support
Oh, that's
of the
beautiful.
Trump
Thank you.
administration.
That's very nice. Thank you. Thank you very much.
As a member of law enforcement for over 20 years and looking at in the tribal government. I'm also honored to be sitting on Governor Walz for Minnesota's task force on missing and murdered Indigenous women, and to see to do away with the party line of addressing this very important issue. And again, I thank you for this today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Great to have you here. Maybe I could ask our great Attorney General to say a few words, and then David Bernhardt. They've worked very hard on this.
Mr. President, this is very much in keeping with your commitment to focus on the issues of those who haven't gotten the priority they deserve in the past. This is, as you know, this is a very vexing and dangerous issue in Indian country, and I appreciate your leadership on it, and I'm looking forward to working with the Secretary on this task force.
Good. Thank you very much. Thanks, Bill. And David, please.
Mr. President, this is an opportunity to bring the expertise of the Department of Justice and the experience and expertise of Interior together with our teams to work for these communities that desperately can use our help, and we're excited about it.
Thank you. You've done a great
Thank you,
job.
sir.
Very great job. So this is very important to me and to David and to Bill and to everybody here. And these are great leaders. They've suffered tremendously. And we're going to see if we can stop that. So thank you all for being here. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Did you watch the results coming in of the election that just happened?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
What's your message to the people who voted for those democracies?
Well, we're with them. I have a very good relationship, as you know, with President Xi. We're in the final throes of a very important deal. I guess you could say one of the most important deals in trade ever. It's going very well, but at the same time, we want to see it go well in Hong Kong, and I think it will. I think that President Xi can make that happen, and I know him, and I know he'd like to make it happen. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so, and first of all, I don't know why that reporter or journalist or whoever asked the question about China. You're at a meeting for Native American issues, and then you ask Donald Trump about China, which I find to be perfectly odd. But didn't Trump look a little impatient to be there, though? He's like, all right, we're done. So the executive order, I looked up the executive order, and it states, Executive Order on Establishing the Task Force on Missing and Murdered American Indians and Alaska Natives. That's the name of it. And I don't really understand why the language in this particular order is always referring to American Indians. I don't understand why you can't just say Native Americans, including Alaska Natives. Native Americans, I don't know. But anyway, I digress. By the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, blah, 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 legal speak. Section 1, purpose. My administration has heard the ongoing and serious concerns of tribal governments regarding missing and murdered members of American Indian and Alaskan Native communities, particularly women and girls. To address the severity of those concerns, top officials within the federal government will cooperate and engage with the tribal governments. Establishment. There is hereby established the Task Force on Missing and Murdered American Indians and Alaska Natives Task Force, co-chaired by Attorney General and the Secretary of Interior, or their designees. The Department of Justice shall provide funding and administrative support as may be necessary for the performance and functions of the task force. The Attorney General, in consultation with the Secretary, shall designate an official of the Department of Justice to serve as the executive director of the task force, responsible for coordinating its day-to-day functions. As necessary and appropriate, the co-chairs may afford other members of the task force an opportunity to provide input into the decision of whom to designate as the executive director. In addition to the co-chairs, the task force shall be composed wholly of full-time or permanent part-time officers or employees of the federal government and shall include the following members: the Director of Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, Department of the Interior, the Director of the Office on Violence Against Women, Department of Justice, the Director of the Office of Justice Services, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Department of the Interior, the Chair of the Native American Issues Subcommittee of the Attorney General's Advisory Committee, the Commissioner of the Administration for Native Americans, Department of Health and Human Services, and such representatives of other executive departments, agencies, and offices as the co-chairs may, from time to time, designate. Mission and functions. The task force shall conduct appropriate consultations with the tribal governments on the scope and nature of the issues regarding missing and murdered American Indians and Alaska Natives. Develop model protocols and procedures to apply to new and unsolved cases of missing or murdered persons in American Indian and Alaska Native communities, including best practices for A. Improving the way law enforcement investigators and prosecutors respond to the high volume of such cases and to the investigative challenges that may be presented in cases involving female victims. Collecting and sharing data among various jurisdictions and law enforcement agencies, and better use of existing criminal databases such as the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, NAMUS, the National Crime Information Center, and the Combined DNA Index System, including the National DNA Index System. Establish a multidisciplinary, multi-jurisdictional team including representatives from tribal law enforcement and the Departments of Justice and the Interior to review cold cases involving missing and murdered American Indians and Alaska Natives. Address the need for greater clarity concerning roles, authorities, and jurisdiction throughout the life cycles of cases involving missing and murdered American Indians and Alaska Natives by developing and publishing best practices, guidances for use by federal, state, local, and tribal law enforcement in cases involving missing and murdered American Indians and Alaska Natives to include best practices related to communication with affected families from initiation of an investigation through case resolution or closure, facilitating formal agreements or arrangements among federal, state, local, and tribal law enforcement to promote maximally cooperative, trauma-informed responses to cases involving missing and murdered American Indians and Alaska Natives. Just say Native Americans. So let's get to the better part here. No later than 1 year after the date of this order, the task force shall develop and submit to the President, through the Assistant to the President for Domestic Policy, a written report regarding the activities and accomplishments of the task force, the status of projects the task force has not yet completed, and specific recommendations for future action of the task force. No later than 2 years after the date of this order, the task force shall develop and submit to the President, through the Assistant to the President for Domestic Policy, a final written report regarding the activities and accomplishments of the task force. Here is the part that I've been waiting to get to, and the part that irks the fuck out of me. This little tidbit of information towards the end here. Section 6, termination. The task force shall terminate 2 years after the date of this order, unless otherwise directed by the President. Nothing in this order shall be construed to impair otherwise or fail, blah, blah, blah. So basically, you set up a task force to help Native Americans, but it only lasts for 2 years, and it has to be reinstated by the President, by the authority of the President. He has to essentially make sure that it continues. Nowhere in that piece of legislation does it say anything about the cost, anything about the funding. It doesn't talk about the source of the funding. It doesn't say how much funding is actually coming in to help with continue the task force. It just says, oh, in 2 years we'll tell you everything we did, and maybe not want to continue it. It's up to you, Mr. President. Now, hopefully, Bernie Sanders gets elected, and he would be one to be like, yeah, I'm gonna sign, and I'm gonna fucking pull more funding towards this, because it is a terrible issue, and it's something that needs to be addressed. But 2 years? Really? Only 2 years. That's the termination date, unless otherwise reauthorized by the President. Another thing that bugs the fuck out of me is Attorney General William Barr is going to be one of the head chiefs of this task force. A fucking racist asshole who's on record of saying shit no more recently than earlier at the beginning of December. Or, excuse me, November it might have been. I think it was before this task force. He said shit about poorer black communities, about these people who don't respect police may not really get the protection of the police. People who don't respect a man in uniform may not really be served the attention that they deserve. If you do not respect the police, then why should you even be served by the men who have sworn to protect and serve? First of all, that's just gross. I mean, maybe these communities already have a bad relationship with cops. I don't know, because some fucking cops are brutal assholes who end up shooting unarmed black kids in the street every day and beat the fuck out of them for little to nothing more than scratching their ear. Shit like that. Maybe I can understand why somebody might not really respect an officer in their community if their community is stricken with violence by the police in their community. Anyway, so I looked up a Voice of America article regarding this task force, and here's what it says. Native Americans are taking a wait-and-see approach to a new White House task force charged with boosting the physical safety of Indigenous people at a time when American Indian and Alaska Native women face elevated risks of going missing or being murdered. President Donald Trump signed an executive order last week establishing Operation Lady Justice, a working party of 8 officials from the FBI, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the Departments of Interior, Justice, and Health and Human Services. Attorney General William Barr and Interior Department Secretary David Bernhardt will head the task force. We will leverage every resource we have to bring safety to our tribal communities, and we will not waver in this mission, Trump said during an Oval Office signing ceremony Tuesday, November 26th. The order comes in the wake of an announcement Barr made during a recent trip to Montana, where he said the government will commit $1.5 million to hire coordinators in 11 states where the crisis is most pressing. Among other goals, they will work to systemize the way tribal, local, state, and federal law enforcement report and manage missing and murdered Indigenous women cases. So there we have a number. $1.5 million. Just $1.5 million. Here's a little some breadcrumbs. Here's some breadcrumbs. Take that. Take $1.5 million to help with your plague of missing and murdered women and girls. This is astounding. We have an infinite military budget. People who bankrupted the country, Freudian slip, just like that other asshole on MSNBC, I believe it was, who bankrupted this country in 2008. Wall Street assholes. We have no Wall Street transaction tax yet. $1.5 million for Native Americans suffering. That's like fucking peanuts. Really? $1.5 million. Alright. Joining Trump in his announcement were Navajo Nation Vice President Miriam Leiser and Second Lady Dodie Leiser, Milak Band of Ojibwe Chief Executive Melanie Benjamin, Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, or Ojibwe, actually, Ojibwe Chairman Kevin Dupuis, and Crow Chairman Alvin A.J. Not Afraid Jr. I do like that name too. All of whom thanked the president. Quote, I commend President Trump and his administration for recognizing the dramatic epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous relatives, Leiser said. Throughout our tribal nations, we hear far too many stories of families, victims, and survivors, so we need to keep our sacred women and children safe and protected. Not Afraid Jr. welcomed White House support in addressing the problem. Nation to nation, I thank him for placing a spotlight on those we have lost, recognizing that losing one more child, one more person, is one too many, he said. But other prominent Native voices have been critical. Democratic Congresswoman Deb Haaland of New Mexico, a member of Pueblo Laguna, called the funding inadequate. The DOJ's plan reflects a lack of consultation with tribes, which is a pattern of this administration on all Indian country issues, she said in a statement released last week. Susan Harjo, Hodolgi Muskogee, a member of the Cheyenne tribe, is a Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient and a lifelong champion of Native rights. She told Voice of America the task force, consisting entirely of federal officials, co-ops the efforts of Native missing and murdered Indigenous women activists at the tribal, community, or state level. Harjo said she believes the task force is an effort to claim the missing, murdered, and Indigenous women issue and take it away from Democrats during long-stalled efforts to renew the Violence Against Women Act, which expired in February. Last April, the House passed a version of the Violence Against Women Act that would block people convicted of stalking or abusing partners from buying guns, a provision strongly opposed by Senate Republicans who have blocked voting on the bill. So, this administration and Senate Republicans, who are there because of Trump, by the way, care so deeply about people they're such altruists that they're going to block voting on a bill that stops men who are abusive spouses from buying a gun. I'm not even going to get into the epidemic of gun violence right now. But isn't that fucking amazing? They're willing to block a bill that would prevent men who beat on their girlfriends, who beat the shit out of their wives, possibly children, from purchasing a gun. These are the type of people who really care about Native Americans. Doesn't it seem that way? They really care. They care so much about women that they're going to block voting on a bill that prevents men who hit women from buying guns. Yeah, real altruists there. In this case, the president's GOP women and men in the Senate were not going to allow enactment of the substantive legislation, Harjo said via Facebook. And the Trump 2020 campaign wanted to claim an issue and take it away from the Democrats in the Senate and in the 2020 race. So the task force seems to be the best route to make any advance in the issue and to tie the controlling party to the outcomes of its own process. For their part, Senate Republicans say Democrats' favored version of Violence Against Women Act has no chance of becoming law in a politically divided Washington. Quote, no survivors are helped by a bill that isn't signed into law. Iowa Republican Senator Joni Ernst said last month, the Senate Democrats' bill is a non-starter. It won't pass the Senate. It won't get the president's signature. Voice of America reached out to missing, murdered, and Indigenous women Facebook groups for comment on the White House task force. Responses were overwhelmingly negative. One user wrote, if Trump wanted to help, he should have moved Violence Against Women Act reauthorization through. Quote, Trump has made it very clear how he feels and what he thinks when it comes to natives. From his early congressional testimony concerning native casinos in 1993 to his executive order on the Dakota Access Pipeline, said Jackson Wyatt, a member of the Cree Nation living in Astoria, Oregon. There will be a shoe that drops on natives at some point. A member of the Blackfeet Nation in Montana who asked not to be identified told Voice of America, it is merely a ploy for votes. $1.5 million will last about a year for staffing, nothing long term. Others stated concerns that the task force focuses on reservations to the exclusion of urban Native American populations. According to the Urban Indian Health Institute, 70% of Alaska Natives live in urban areas where women not only go missing, but are underreported by municipal police agencies and all too often ignored by local media. That said, a few Facebook users see Operation Lady Justice as a good start that will help the general public understand the full extent of the crisis. No matter who signed it, no matter how little or how much it covers, no matter it's somebody that's liked or not liked, be glad there is something pointed at a positive direction. One Facebook user posted on the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives No Borders Facebook page. Quote, it may help stop the gap that has been between the indigenous peoples and local law. It's a start. And they have two tweets here. One by Ruth Hopkins. If he's serious, he should stop forcing oil pipelines through native lands. They bring dangerous man camps to our territories, and we lack the jurisdiction and resources to stop non-native workers from beating, raping, and sex trafficking native women and girls. Simon Moya Smith wrote, meanwhile, Trump's beloved oil and gas industry is the root cause of toxic man camps. Man camps, housing for predominantly male oil and gas workers, is directly tied to the increase of murdered and missing indigenous women. Curb oil and gas, reduce the number of missing, murdered, and indigenous women. So, some of these people, they're absolutely right. This is nothing more than a window dressing, so that they look better. Just so they look good. Oh, look how good. Ain't this should have happened a long time ago. Look at my squiggles. Do you like my squiggles? Here, take the breadcrumbs. Take the breadcrumbs. Yes, enjoy my squiggles. Do you like my squiggles? My squigglies on a little piece of paper. Does that help you? Meanwhile, yeah, he did nothing about the Dakota Access Pipeline. A guy who got real drunk one day decided to walk out to the pipeline, take his revolver and shoot the thing, and then caused a gas leak. This shit pisses me off, though. $1.5 million is nothing. It's nothing that will genuinely help long term. It's nothing more than a window dressing. And this issue actually affects someone who I'm close to. My significant other is part Native. And she has a biological sister who, when she was young, there was a store called the Hip Hop Candy Shop. And what she would do is go to the store, and I'm not sure I have all the details correct, but I think the owner of the store, one of the owners of the store, this Hip Hop Candy Shop, talked to her and made her feel good about herself. It was like, oh, you're so pretty, I care so much about you. He would buy her things, he would treat her nice, he'd get her to fall in love with him. Oh, I love you. This underage girl. And then he'd take her down to the cities and be like, well, now that you're here, why don't you let me pump you full of drugs and go out and whore yourself for me so that I can make money off of you because I'm now your fucking pimp. That's the type of shit that happens. And that's the type of shit that Trump is giving a half measure to help. Look, am I giving any credit to the fact that he's doing this? Yeah, a little. I'm glad he's doing this much. But how much is it really going to help? If he really cared, if he was really altruist, then he could do better than $1.5 million. How much is Trump worth? He doesn't abide by the emoluments clause. He's president, and he's still receiving money from all of these places he owns. He goes on expensive golf trips on taxpayers' dime. And he gives Native Americans a task force that ends in 2 years. Unless otherwise reauthorized by the president. So let's hope to shit that Donald Trump is not reelected in 2020. Let's hope that Bernie Sanders is elected in 2020. And that someone like Bernie would go above and beyond what has happened here.